So we're seeing 190-ish on this one. So this cylinder seems to be the best so far, but we're gonna do 2 readings to make sure that this number is accurate. So we put some oil, just regular diesel oil, inside the first cylinder. We're using Shell Rotella T4, but doesn't really matter. The reason we're doing this is because by putting oil in here, we are making the volume inside smaller, which will raise the compression as we're cranking. If the compression raises, that means that the oil helped seal the piston rings and the valves are closing and they're doing their job, which it did. It went up by almost 100 PSI. So that could mean that we're having trouble with the rings in the cylinder wall. So we're gonna continue the test for all 3 cylinders, and if they all increase, that's probably what it's leading towards. So this is about 25 milliliters of oil, and we are just directly putting it straight into the injector hole because this is direct injection. And once again, if this raises the compression test, then we know that it's helping to seal and it's probably a ring issue. So this is also known as a wet compression test, and we're going to be retesting it now. Okay, so now it's reading 280, almost 290, which means we have an increase of about 100 PSI. So definitely the oil is helping to seal. It's still not perfect. It's estimated to be between 300 to 400, but you know, we're getting there with oil. So we're definitely gonna have to take off the head, which is pretty simple on this motor. And we're gonna check out the cylinders after this. Okay, well, unfortunately, it's pretty much what we suspected. So we have an increase of average 100 PSI per cylinder after applying the oil inside directly, which is, you know, indicative that the rings are probably stuck or worn. We don't know much about the history of this tractor when my dad got it, but the guy did run it low on oil a little bit, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Anyways, we're gonna pull the head. So first things first, we're gonna drain the coolant, then we're gonna drain the oil because we might leave the oil, but if we do have to take apart the bottom to take the pistons out, then we're gonna have to drain the oil anyways. So we're gonna start by removing this tank, the header, the muffler, the intake, and then we'll get to the head. This part is pretty heavy and it's weird to get out, so I'm actually just gonna remove the muffler first and then the header. So the idea is to try to minimize how many gaskets I'm gonna need to reuse. This is a pretty simple gasket if I need to replace it. Never seen anything like this. This is the crankcase ventilation, like blow by, and it just connects straight to there. But this is crazy, look at this. Okay, so we just took off the water pump, and I also took off the exhaust manifold and the air intake manifold and some other random things to help us get clearance. So now the only thing that's left is to remove the actual head bolts. There's 8 of them. Right, so we just pulled out the head bolts. This is kind of a guess work in a way because we don't have like the specs. So we don't really know what the proper foot-pounds for tightening is, but we used a torque wrench to see when they broke loose, and it was between 85 to 90 foot-pounds of torque. So we're gonna go based off that when we install the new ones, or hopefully in the meantime we can find a parts manual for this model motor. It's a ZN390. Okay, we just pulled the head, 2 valves per cylinder, and look at this crazy deposit. So I don't know exactly if the air fuel ratio was off, if bad fuel was used, I don't know, but and does anyone know, does this mean it was heated? I don't know, this could be just leftover from the gasket. Gasket's still on the block, but it's got significant amount of deposit. So this could lead to pinging, decreased efficiency, all kinds of things. Of course, that means, you know, the same thing for inside. This oil here is because we did the wet compression test. So that's fine. I'm not surprised there's oil, but still, lots of sludge, lots of deposit. You can see lots of carbon deposit here. So yeah, this motor was not running great, that's for sure. So we're going to be removing the head gasket, draining the oil pan, and we're going to pull out the pistons. Yeah, so this is actually pretty good news. Once we cleaned up the cylinder wall, you can still see the cross hatching at least on these two, it looks really good. This piston is up, and this one also had the worst compression, this one. But the cylinder walls actually look in really good shape. There's no vertical lines. So that's a good news, because I thought we were gonna have to re-sleeve this motor. Okay, so update. We removed the drive shaft, which connects the front differential, we'll call it, to the rear. And obviously you can put it in 4x4 or not. The problem was that both ends of these splines right here have a retention pin that goes perpendicular to the axle, and that's what locks in the drive shaft. But there's a sleeve that's sort of with a spring on each, oh, see right there. So the pin goes through that coupler, just like that. And that's what prevents the drive shaft from accidentally coming off, which I don't see how it would anyways, but this whole assembly has a spring, and it compresses and decompresses this exterior shell. So there's pressure on that pin, so you can't really just pull it out easy. But we used a dowel or punch or whatever this thing's called, and then a screw, and got it out. And so now that we got the drive shaft out, now we have adequate room to pull off the oil pan. You can see that indentation in the oil pan. It's made specifically for this model to accommodate that drive shaft running from the rear to the front. Okay, so just a quick update. This is where we're at. We removed the oil pan, the bottom of the oil pan, and we also removed the oil pickup. So this was kind of hard to get to. One of these bolts, it was hitting the side of the block basically. But this is how it's looking like now underneath. Hopefully you can see. So yeah, now we're just gonna keep going ahead with the removal. We're gonna mark the connecting rods, and then we're gonna start disassembling that, and then hopefully we can just pull the pistons out from the bottom. So my dad just removed this end cap from the first piston 1 from the front back, and let's check out the bearing. The bearing has some wear, but overall it's not bad. This is a farm tractor, and we don't know any history about it, like I mentioned. So definitely has some wear, but it's not horrible at all. So this was also the piston with the lowest, or the cylinder with the lowest compression rather. So we're gonna keep going. Okay, now we're gonna be pulling up cylinder 2. My dad's pushing it from the bottom, and look at that. Okay, so I am gonna mark the orientation of this, but general impression is just wow. There's a lot of buildup, a lot of soot, but the piston itself looks pretty good. So yeah, I'm gonna clean this off, decarbonize it as much as I can, and then take a good look and see what's going on. So we just pulled out all 3 pistons. We left the crankshaft in place. There shouldn't be issues with timing, because the crankshaft and the camshaft are connected either via chain or gears. My guess is gears somewhere here in this front end plate. Kind of reminds me of like a Cummins. But the timing shouldn't be an issue because we didn't mess with those. So yeah, we pulled out all 3. Here they are. We're gonna deep clean, you know, all the parts, and then evaluate if we need to replace the bearings. But just a quick glance, they honestly look fine. Like, they really do look good. There's no signs of wear or warpage or overheating. Once again, we are gonna clean everything and then evaluate it again. Obviously the carbon deposits on the pistons, you know, that needs to be cleaned. But everything looks pretty good, so I don't know. We're gonna have to see why this engine was not holding compression.